Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and once again we are here at Paradise for a wander round Paradise, a different kind of look. This morning we're going to be talking about the international break, and we're going to be talking about the biggest game of the weekend that happened up at the Garngad at James McGrory Park. So we'll start off with the international break. A lot of fans don't like it. It's all about, trying to make sure you get the 13 internationals, 14 now, back to the club without an injury. Who's the 14th? It's Matt O'Reilly. We've been talking all season about the rise of O'Reilly, and I always felt that the next step in his development and his progress was to get a full international cap for Denmark. Well, that could happen tomorrow night against San Marino. He's been called up. I think he's flying in from Mallorca, just like Brendan Rodgers did yesterday up at James McGrory Park, but we'll come back to that. And it would be fantastic to see him making his debut for Denmark. Who else has starred for Celtic in their respective fixtures for their countries? Well, Callum McGregor, of course, was part of the Scotland side of the night, who were quite cruelly beaten by Spain, but they've still qualified, which is fantastic for Callum McGregor. Greg Taylor and any other Celts are able to push their way into that squad. Liam Scales has won his first cap for Ireland, and yes, he was up against Giakoumakis, and has got a lot of Celtic fans saying, maybe with a wee bit of hindsight, that we shouldn't have sold him. Liam Scales, again, a bit like O'Reilly, you just want to see that trajectory continue. The most improved player at Celtic Park this season, without a doubt, and now he's got his international credentials as well. So we're looking forward to seeing how the rest of the Celts do before the international break ends. Over the weekend, many of you would have been interested in the international matches, but the biggest game, of course, of the weekend was St Rochs versus a Celtic select in the club's centenary match up at James McGrory Park. And over the last few weeks, a lot of Acsom viewers have been asking, what is the connection between Celtic and St Rochs? Why did the Rock want to play a Celtic select? Well, you look at the community aspect of this. Back in 1920, this was a club for the Glasgow Irish, very much like Celtic were a few years before. And Celtic, of course, signed James McGrory from St Rochs, the prolific goal scorer who had scored in the Junior Scottish Cup final as a 16-year-old. He looked like a man. He went on to become, of course, Britain's top goal scorer, the greatest goal scorer in British football history, James McGrory. And Arsenal tried to sign him, actually, and they offered £10,000, which would have made James McGrory the most expensive footballer on the planet. So yes, yesterday we were up at James McGrory Park for the centenary game. And how did it go? Acsom was given the great privilege of pulling together the Celtic side to face St Rochs up at James McGrory Park yesterday. And how do you start? You start in the dugout, don't you? We have to get a management team together. And a management team, very impressive, was Willie Hockey, well-known businessman, Celtic fan and philanthropist. He was involved in the takeover back in the early 90s. And he was joined by Jim Simonetti from the Jimmy Johnston Academy and Charitable Trust, Tommy McIntyre, who was a coach and ran the academy here at Celtic Park for 14 years, and also the one and only Lisbon Lion, John Clark. It was an absolute honour to see him leading out the Celtic side yesterday at James McGrory Park. We'll come back to James McGrory as well, because he was the man who signed all the Lions except two, Willie Wallace and Ronnie Simpson. So it was really, for me, a great occasion to see John leading the team out yesterday at James McGrory Park. The team itself was made up of Scott Fox in goals. He started his career at Celtic as a youth. He went on and had a brilliant career. He was playing last season. Right up until last season he was playing senior. And he was backed up by Jerry Taylor. But Jerry we'll come back to, because he was on the bulletin today and we spoke all about his performance as well. What a great pleasure it was to see Jerry in goals for Celtic. The defence, Rudi Vata at centre-half, Albanian international, and of course the father of current Celt, Rocco, and he teamed up with John Hughes, who was brilliant. He's looking in great shape, Yogi Hughes. We also had Tosh McKinlay, of course, and Willie Carberry, who was a guest Celtic fan playing for the club, and he was a man of the match if you ask me. You move into the midfield, Pat McGinlay, great goal scorer for Celtic in 93-94. Chick Charnley could have been a Celt, played one game for Lou Macari and a testimonial against Manchester United, and he played another game yesterday. We also had Bobby Petter, who had a very good game, Scott McDonald, Tommy Johnston, Joe Miller. Up top we had Andy Payton, who travelled up from down south as well. We had a really good side. Who could forget Paul Byrne's 2 goals against Rangers? Well, Brendan Rodgers has it, and I'll come back to that in a wee second as well. Brilliant team. Why were they not wearing the hoops? That's the big question. You may be wondering why Celtic weren't wearing the famous world-renowned green and white hoops yesterday, and there's a simple answer to that. Because we were playing at James McGrory Park, we decided to wear the kit that Celtic were wearing in James McGrory's final game in charge of the club. 1965 against Kilmarnock, we wore the Shamrock strip. It's a white jersey with green sleeves, green shorts, white socks, and a big Shamrock on the breast as well. We wore it in 1965, and at that time we had obviously John Clark, Jimmy Johnston, and Bertie Auld had left the club. He was to come back, but he had worn that jersey as well back in the late 50s, believe it or not. And in memory and homage to guys like Jinky and Bertie, we had a number 7 on every jersey and a number 10 on every pair of shorts as well. These men were signed by James McGrory, and that's the reason why we wore the Shamrock jersey yesterday, and I think it went down an absolute storm. I want to talk to you about the Lisbon Lions as well. That team, you know, they're never ever going to be matched in the future for Celtic. We always aspire to be a European club, and I think that it was important yesterday for us to remember that 9 of the 11 guys that started in Lisbon were indeed signed by James McGrory. The team walked out to You'll Never Walk Alone, which is expected for any game involving Celtic, and when we lined up, instead of the Champions League music, we decided to play something a little bit different. And this goes to Saul Davis of James, who was involved in the Celtic team, of course. And his composition, the band's composition, Many Faces. And at this moment in time, with world events, drowning out all the positivity in your social media channels, we decided that this was a positive message, that we're all one human race of many faces, and we've all got to live and work together. So how did the game itself go? Well, it looked as though St Rochs were going to win pretty comfortably. If it wasn't for Scott Fox in the first half, it could have been 3 or 4 easily. But there was a rumour circulating around James McGrory Park that a VIP was going to come and save the day. I got the call to go to the front gate to welcome none other than Brendan Rodgers to the park. He went into that dressing room, and I said one thing to the gaffer. I said, "You're going to have to work your magic, we're 2-0 down." And he did. We pulled it back to 2 each. And unfortunately, the Rock went ahead again, and it finished 4-3, which is probably fitting for St Rochs in their centenary game for them to get the win. But what about that? The gaffer, Brendan Rodgers, turning up on his day off to help support the occasion. Fantastic. He had time for everybody who wanted a picture, everybody who wanted an autograph, and he had awards for everybody who approached him. Spent some time after the game as well speaking to Celtic fans, and he says to me, we had Paul Byrne, remember that goal he scored at Ibrox? He was brilliant, Brendan Rodgers. So fantastic for him, a great birthday present for St Roch, and for one final time, happy birthday to the Rock. Here's to the next 100 years.